Not everyone is meant to hear this. If you've never walked away from an argument feeling strangely quiet, not angry, not defeated, just unsettled, then this may not land the way it's supposed to. But if you've ever been absolutely sure of what you believed, only to realize halfway through a conversation that your certainty was dissolving faster than your words, stay with this, because this isn't about winning arguments. It's about something far more uncomfortable. There are people who don't argue to be right. They argue to see where reality breaks. Aquarius is one of them. Most people treat arguments as emotional events. They defend their identity. They protect their pride. They speak louder when they feel threatened. Aquarius doesn't enter arguments that way. When an Aquarius disagrees with you, they are not emotionally invested in your position. They are curious about its structure. At first, the conversation feels normal, even calm. You state your opinion confidently. You've said this before. Others usually agree. Then Aquarius asks something small, not aggressive, not sarcastic, just precise. And suddenly you're explaining things you've never had to explain before. You don't notice it immediately, but something has already shifted. You start adding details, clarifying intentions, justifying assumptions that previously felt obvious. Aquarius is no longer debating you. They're listening, not to what you believe, but to how you arrive there. They notice when emotion replaces logic, when definitions change mid-sentence, when certainty quietly turns into defense. You think you're holding your ground. They're watching the foundation move. Aquarius operates through air. Air doesn't push. It observes patterns. They don't ask how something feels. They ask whether it holds up when emotion is removed. Most beliefs don't. This is what makes Aquarius unsettling in arguments. They don't attack conclusions. They examine processes. They don't challenge what you think. They question how you think. That's why their questions feel invasive. It's not because they're trying to dominate you. It's because they're trying to see if your thinking is internally consistent. Uranus, the planet that rules Aquarius, isn't interested in destruction for its own sake. It destabilizes systems that no longer make sense. Inherited beliefs, outdated frameworks, ideas that survive only because they were never questioned. So when Aquarius argues, it doesn't feel like aggression. It feels like inspection. And inspection makes people uncomfortable, because most of us don't actually want truth. We want coherence, but only when it protects us. The moment coherence threatens identity, emotion steps in to defend it. Aquarius doesn't follow emotion there. They stay with the inconsistency. They don't raise their voice to overpower you. They don't rush to conclusions. They let you keep talking. And the more you talk, the clearer it becomes, sometimes even to yourself, that something doesn't align. Your argument starts looping. You contradict yourself without realizing it. You appeal to feelings you just dismissed. Aquarius watches. Not smug. Not triumphant. Focused. People assume Aquarius enjoys this. They don't. They're not entertained by collapse. They're recording patterns. Aquarius isn't impressed by confidence. They're impressed by consistency. You can be passionate, persuasive, charismatic. None of it matters if your logic bends under light pressure. That's why arguments involving Aquarius sound different to outsiders. Listeners don't feel manipulated. They don't feel pulled emotionally. They feel clarity emerging. Not because Aquarius explained better, but because the opposing logic couldn't stand on its own. Quietly. And then something subtle happens. Aquarius stops asking questions. Not because you convinced them. Not because they ran out of points. Because they've already seen enough. This is where most people misunderstand Aquarius. They think the argument is still happening. It isn't. Once Aquarius sees the pattern, the conversation is already complete in their mind. They've observed how you think under pressure, where you deflect, where you protect ego over truth, where comfort matters more than coherence. From that moment on, what you say matters less. You're still talking. They're no longer exploring. This is why Aquarius disengages so suddenly. No dramatic exit. No final remark. Just silence. To others, it feels cold, dismissive, arrogant. But internally, Aquarius isn't angry. They're finished. They've determined that further discussion won't bring clarity, only repetition. And repetition is something Aquarius cannot tolerate. This is where the loneliness enters. Because Aquarius doesn't argue to connect. They argue to understand. Most people connect through shared beliefs. Aquarius connects through shared reasoning. Those two rarely overlap. So when the argument ends, Aquarius is often left alone. Not victorious. Not satisfied. Just aware. aware that clarity isolates, aware that truth doesn't always build bridges, aware that being right doesn't create closeness. This is the part no one sees. People accuse Aquarius of being cold, but what they don't see is the disappointment. Aquarius wants to be challenged. They want resistance that thinks. They want to be proven wrong by something coherent. They stay in conversations longer when they sense genuine reasoning. They leave quickly when they sense performance. And this is where Aquarius becomes quietly dangerous. Once they internally label someone as inconsistent, they stop explaining things to them. Not out of spite, out of efficiency. You're no longer someone to explore ideas with. You're a pattern already understood. They don't announce this decision. They don't confront you with it. You only feel the distance later. And by then, it's permanent. Aquarius doesn't argue for dominance. They argue for truth. But truth has consequences. And one of them is that not everyone survives the inspection. And that's where most people stop understanding Aquarius. Because from the outside, it looks like withdrawal. It looks like distance. It looks like arrogance. But internally, something very specific has already happened. Aquarius has finished the analysis. They are no longer asking themselves whether you are right or wrong. They are asking whether you are capable of examining yourself without emotional armor. And once they see that you're not, the conversation loses all value. This is the part that unsettles people the most. Aquarius doesn't argue to convince you. They argue to see if conversation itself is possible. Not talking, not debating, not defending, thinking together. When that possibility disappears, Aquarius disappears with it. This is why their silence feels heavier than words. Because when Aquarius stops engaging, it doesn't mean they lost interest in the topic. It means they lost interest in you as a thinking partner. That realization hits people later. Weeks after the argument. Months sometimes. You notice they no longer explain things to you. They no longer challenge your ideas. They no longer ask what you think. They still talk. They're still polite. But something essential is gone. And you can't point to the exact moment it happened. Because it didn't happen loudly. It happened quietly. Right when your logic stopped being honest with itself. Here's where the story turns inward. Aquarius isn't immune to this pattern. They know how destructive this ability can be. Because the same way they dismantle other people's thinking, they do it to themselves. Relentlessly. They question their own beliefs until nothing flimsy survives. They strip ideas down until only structure remains. They live with fewer certainties than most people could tolerate. This is the hidden cost. Aquarius often lives without the comfort of emotional illusions. They don't get to believe things just because they feel good. They don't get to keep ideas that collapse under scrutiny. They pay for clarity with isolation. And this is where the dark edge appears. Because once Aquarius sees inconsistency, they struggle to unsee it. They may still care about you. They may still respect parts of you. But they can't fully trust your thinking again. Not because you were wrong, but because you weren't willing to find out. This is where Aquarius can become emotionally distant without intending to. They don't cut people off dramatically. They simply stop investing intellectual energy. And for people who bond through conversation, that absence feels like rejection. Aquarius rarely explains this. They don't say, "I stopped talking to you because your logic failed." They just move on. This is why some people feel inexplicably hurt by Aquarius long after an argument has ended. They don't understand what they lost. They think it was about disagreement. It wasn't. It was about coherence. Now here's the uncomfortable part Aquarius doesn't like admitting. They can be wrong. They are wrong sometimes. But they are rarely confronted. Because to challenge Aquarius, you have to do something most people avoid. You have to question your own thinking, as aggressively as you question theirs. You have to stay calm when your ideas are stripped down. You have to let go of identity mid-conversation. You have to choose truth over emotional safety. Very few people can do that. So Aquarius walks through life rarely being met at their level. Not superior, just alone. And this creates another risk. Because when you are rarely challenged, you can begin to confuse clarity with correctness. Aquarius can become too certain of their own frameworks, too quick to disengage, too efficient at categorizing people. They may miss moments where patience mattered more than precision. They may abandon conversations that could have evolved, if given more time. This is the shadow side. Not cruelty, not arrogance, but premature conclusion. Even Aquarius has blind spots. They just aren't emotional ones. They are relational ones. And the paradox is this. Aquarius wants truth more than connection, but still longs to be understood. They want someone who can sit in discomfort without flinching. Someone who doesn't need to win. Someone who isn't afraid of being wrong. When they find that person, they stay. They soften. They explain. They listen as deeply as they question. But until then, they keep their distance. So if you've ever felt cut off by an Aquarius, it wasn't because you disagreed. It was because the conversation stopped being honest. And if you are an Aquarius listening to this, you already know the cost. You know how lonely clarity can be. You know how exhausting it is to keep seeing what others avoid. You know how often silence feels safer than repeating yourself. But here's the truth that rarely gets said. Not everyone who becomes emotional is irrational. Not everyone who defends themselves is incapable of thought. Sometimes people just aren't ready. And sometimes, stepping away too quickly prevents growth on both sides. Aquarius isn't meant to soften their clarity, but they may need to soften their timing. Because not every inconsistency is a dead end. Some are beginnings. And not every argument is a test. Some are invitations. The real question isn't whether Aquarius is too logical. The real question is this: would you still believe what you believe if no one emotionally agreed with you? If that question unsettled you, that's not discomfort. That's awareness. And awareness changes how you listen, how you speak, how you argue. If this made you pause, if it made you rethink how you defend your ideas, or how quickly you dismiss others, share it with someone who thinks they hate arguments. Like it if you recognized yourself somewhere in this. Subscribe if you want conversations that don't reassure you, but help you see more clearly. Because the arguments that change you most aren't the loud ones. They're the quiet ones that keep echoing long after the conversation ends.